Have you ever had a friend who stuck by your side no matter what? Today, we're going to tell you a story about such a friendship. In the time of the judges, there lived a woman named Naomi. She was married to a man named Elimelech, and they had 2 sons. They were a happy family living in Bethlehem, but then a severe famine hit the land, so they moved to the land of Moab, where they hoped life would be better. But life had other plans. Naomi's husband died, leaving her alone with her 2 sons, who later married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. Tragically, Naomi's sons also passed away after 10 years, leaving the 3 women alone in a foreign land. Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem, as she heard that the Lord had blessed her homeland with food. She told her daughters-in-law to return to their mothers' homes, to find new husbands and start fresh lives. Orpah, though sad, agreed and kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth clung to Naomi. She declared, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." Ruth's words were a promise, a vow of loyalty and love. She chose Naomi over a potentially easier life. She chose loyalty over convenience. Back in Bethlehem, Ruth worked tirelessly in the fields, gleaning leftover grain to feed both herself and Naomi. Her hard work, determination, and kindness did not go unnoticed. Boaz, the owner of the field and a relative of Naomi's late husband, was moved by Ruth's devotion to her mother-in-law. He ensured Ruth was protected and had enough grain to gather. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi, her kindness and hard work, led her to a new life that she could never have imagined. Boaz, touched by her noble qualities, married Ruth. And Ruth, who was once a foreigner in the land, became the great-grandmother of none other than King David. This story of Ruth and Naomi is a testament to the power of friendship and loyalty. It shows us that true friends stick by each other no matter the circumstances. They support each other, care for each other, and like Ruth, they choose each other. This tale is not just about the loyalty of a friend, but also about kindness to others, hard work, and faith in God's plan. Ruth, a woman of noble character, teaches us that loyalty and kindness can lead to blessings beyond our imagination. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi shows us the power of true friendship. Remember, true friends stick together in good times and bad. Do you know what happens when people don't appreciate what they have? Let's find out. There was a time when the people of Israel had a unique arrangement. They didn't have a king like other nations. Instead, they had judges, leaders chosen by God Himself to guide them. The last of these judges was a wise and faithful man named Samuel. But as Samuel grew old, the people began to worry. They feared what might happen when Samuel was no longer there to lead them. So they came to Samuel with a request. "Give us a king to lead us," they said, "like all the other nations have." This request saddened Samuel. He knew that having a king was not what God wanted for His people. God had always been their king, guiding them and protecting them. But the people were insistent. They didn't want to be different from other nations. They wanted a human king, someone they could see and follow. Samuel tried to warn them. He told them how a king would take their sons and daughters, their fields and vineyards, and their best animals. He warned them that a king would make them his servants. But the people wouldn't listen. "No," they said, "we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles." Samuel was heartbroken, but he took their request to God. And God, in His infinite wisdom, responded, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king." God told Samuel to give the people what they wanted, but also to warn them of the consequences. And so Samuel did as God instructed. He told the Israelites they would have their king, but he also warned them one last time of the price they would pay. The people didn't heed his warning, and soon after, Saul was anointed as the first king of Israel. But as time passed, the Israelites saw the truth in Samuel's words. They saw how a human king could be flawed and make mistakes. They saw how a king could lead them astray. They learned the hard way that what they thought they wanted was not what was best for them. Sometimes, like the Israelites, we too don't appreciate what we have until it's gone. We may think we know what's best for us, but it's important to remember that our understanding is limited. It's always wise to trust in God, who sees the bigger picture and knows what's truly best for us. The Israelites learned the hard way that sometimes what we want isn't always what's best for us. Have you ever felt like the underdog? Like you're not as big or strong or popular as others? Well, this story is for you. Long, long ago, in the land of Israel, there was a man named Jesse. Jesse had 8 sons, each strong and capable in his own right. But today we're not talking about the oldest, the strongest, or the most popular. We're talking about the youngest, the smallest, the shepherd boy, David. When the time came for God to choose a new king for Israel, he didn't call upon the mighty warriors or the eloquent speakers. He called upon the prophet Samuel and told him to go to Jesse's house, for the future king was one of his sons. Samuel arrived at Jesse's home with a special task, but as he looked at the 7 eldest sons, each one bigger and seemingly more kingly than the last, he was left puzzled. God had not chosen any of them. Could there be a mistake? But God whispered to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, for the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." And so Samuel asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" Jesse replied, "There is still the youngest. He is tending the sheep." Samuel insisted on seeing him, and so David was called. David was not like his brothers. He was ruddy, with bright eyes and a gentle spirit. But when he stood before Samuel, God said, "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." And so Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed David in the presence of his brothers. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day onwards. Isn't it interesting how God chose David? He wasn't the biggest or the strongest, nor was he a great warrior like his brothers. But he had something far more important. He had a good heart, full of faith and love for God. David's story is a reminder that God doesn't look at the things people look at. People judge by outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. He sees our thoughts, our feelings, our intentions. He knows us better than we know ourselves. So, if you ever feel like you're not enough, remember David. Remember that you don't have to be the biggest or the strongest or the most popular. You just have to be you. God values the kindness in your heart, the courage in your spirit, and the love in your actions. Remember, you don't have to be the biggest or the strongest to do great things. It's what's inside that counts. Ever faced a challenge so big it seemed impossible? Well, David did. And guess what? He overcame it. This tale of courage begins with a young shepherd boy named David, who was chosen by God for a purpose far greater than he could ever imagine. David was not a warrior. He was not large or intimidating. He was a shepherd, a keeper of sheep. Yet when the giant named Goliath threatened his people, David stepped forward. He was not equipped with a sword, a spear, or a shield. Instead, he held in his hand a simple slingshot and 5 smooth stones. Goliath was a towering figure, a seasoned warrior who instilled fear in the bravest of men. David, on the other hand, was just a boy, but he had something that no one else had. He had faith. He had courage. He trusted in God. As David faced Goliath, he did not see an unbeatable giant. He saw a challenge that needed to be faced, a fight that needed to be fought. He saw an opportunity to show the power of faith. With unshakable confidence, David said to the towering Goliath, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." With those words, David put his trust not in weapons, but in God. As Goliath charged, David took a stone from his pouch and with a swift swing of his slingshot, sent it flying. The stone hit its mark, Goliath's forehead, and the giant fell. The battlefield fell silent. The unbeatable had been beaten. The impossible had been achieved. David, with his slingshot and his faith, had defeated the mighty Goliath. David's courage was not born from his physical strength or fighting skills. It came from his faith. His trust in God gave him the courage to face the giant, to stand against the impossible. It was this faith, this courage, that allowed a shepherd boy to become a king. This tale of courage is not just about a boy and a giant, it's a reminder of the power of faith, a testament to the strength that comes from trusting in God. When we face our giants, may we remember David. May we hold fast to our faith, may we muster our courage, and may we face our challenges head on. David's courage reminds us that with faith, we can overcome any challenge. From a shepherd boy to a king. Can you believe that? Let's find out how it happened. David, the young lad who once tended to his father's sheep, was now anointed as the king of Judah, the southern kingdom of Israel. But that was only the beginning of his journey. It took 7 long years for him to be recognized as the king over all of Israel. David was not just an ordinary king. He was a king chosen by God. He was a man after God's own heart. He didn't become king because he was the strongest or the smartest. He became king because he was humble, dedicated, and had a heart full of love for God. David's rule as king was not easy. There were battles to be fought, decisions to be made, and responsibilities to be fulfilled. But David did not let these challenges deter him. He remained committed to his duties and to his people. He ruled with justice and fairness, always seeking God's guidance in his decisions. During his rule, David not only brought peace to his nation, but he also brought prosperity. He expanded the borders of Israel, making it a powerful and respected nation in the region. He built a great palace for himself, but his heart was always set on building a temple for God. David's love for God was evident in everything he did. He wrote many beautiful psalms, songs of praise to God, which we still sing today. His relationship with God was the cornerstone of his life and his rule as king. Even when he made mistakes, he turned to God for forgiveness and guidance. David's life was a testament to his dedication to God. It showed that with God on our side, nothing is impossible. His ascension from a humble shepherd boy to the king of a prosperous nation was not a product of luck or coincidence. It was a result of his faith in God and his commitment to serving him. David's story is not just a tale of a king, it is a story of faith, perseverance, and dedication. It is a story that shows us that no matter where we come from, no matter what challenges we face, with humility, dedication, and God on our side, we can achieve great things. David's story reminds us that God sees not as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. David may have been a shepherd boy in the eyes of men, but in the eyes of God, he was a king. David's story shows us that with humility, dedication, and God on our side, we can achieve great things. Wow, what an adventure we've had today. Let's see what we've learned. We began our journey with the touching tale of Ruth and Naomi. We saw how Ruth, a woman of great strength and loyalty, chose to stay with her mother-in-law Naomi in a time of profound loss and difficulty. Ruth's dedication teaches us how to be steadfast and loyal in our relationships. Her story is a beautiful example of how love and loyalty can lead us to unexpected blessings. Then we traveled to the time when the Israelites asked for a king. Despite having God as their leader, they insisted on having a king like other nations. This story shows us the folly of comparing ourselves to others and desiring what they have. We must trust that God's plans for us are unique and perfect. From there, we ventured into the story of David, a humble shepherd boy chosen by God to be king. This was an unexpected choice, wasn't it? David was not the strongest or the oldest among his brothers, yet God saw his heart and chose him. This teaches us that God values our hearts more than our outward appearances or abilities. It reminds us that humility and a heart dedicated to God are more precious than any worldly attribute. Next, we relive David's courageous encounter with Goliath. A young boy facing a giant might seem impossible, but David's faith in God gave him the courage to face the giant and win. This story is a powerful reminder that with faith in God, we can overcome even the biggest of challenges. Finally, we celebrated David's ascension to the throne. He went from being a shepherd boy to the king of Israel, fulfilling God's promise. This story shows us that God is faithful to his promises, and he will always guide us to where we're meant to be. Such incredible stories, aren't they? Each one filled with lessons that are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. The loyalty of Ruth, the folly of the Israelites' desire for a king, God's unexpected choice of David, David's courage against Goliath, and his ascension to the throne. These stories remind us of the importance of loyalty, humility, courage, and above all, faith in God. Remember these stories and the lessons they teach us. Loyalty, humility, courage, and above all, faith in God. Until next time, keep these stories in your heart. Have you ever wondered about the fascinating stories in the Bible and what they teach us? If you have, then you're in for a treat today. We're about to embark on a journey back in time, to a world filled with kings, prophets, wisdom, and wonder. This is the world of the Old Testament, a collection of ancient texts that form part of the Bible. The stories we'll explore are not just about history, they're about life lessons, morals, faith, and humanity. We'll start with King David and Bathsheba, then move on to Solomon's wise judgment, Solomon building God's temple, Israel rebelling against Rehoboam, and finally, Elijah's confrontation with the prophets of Baal. Each story is an adventure, a lesson, and a piece of us. So, are you ready to dive into these amazing stories and discover their morals? Let's begin with a story that takes us back to the time of King David, a man after God's own heart, yet not without his own share of mistakes. This tale is a powerful reminder that temptation can lead even the most righteous astray, but it also illustrates the power of repentance. In the ancient city of Jerusalem, King David was a highly respected ruler. One day, as he was walking on the roof of his palace, he saw a very beautiful woman named Bathsheba. Despite knowing that she was married to Uriah, one of his most loyal soldiers, David was overcome by temptation and made a choice that would lead him down a path of sin. David sent for Bathsheba, and in time, she fell pregnant. In an attempt to conceal his wrongdoing, David summoned Uriah from the battlefield, hoping he would go home to Bathsheba and the child would be presumed his. But Uriah, loyal to his comrades on the battlefield, refused to enjoy the comforts of home while his fellow soldiers were in the field. With his plan foiled, David's desperation grew. He ordered Uriah to the front lines where the fighting was fiercest, fully aware that this would likely lead to Uriah's death. And so it happened. Uriah fell in battle and Bathsheba became David's wife. However, God saw David's actions and was displeased. He sent Nathan the prophet to David. Nathan told David a story about a rich man who, despite having many sheep, took the only lamb of a poor man to feed a guest. David was furious at the injustice in the story, not realizing it was a metaphor for his own actions. Nathan then revealed the truth, stating, "You are the man." David was struck with the enormity of his sin. He had allowed temptation to lead him into adultery and murder. But instead of denying or justifying his actions, David confessed and repented sincerely. He said, "I have sinned against the Lord." God, in his infinite mercy, forgave David, but there were consequences to his actions. The child born to Bathsheba fell ill, and despite David's prayers and fasting, the child did not survive. This was a painful consequence of David's actions, but it also served as a stark reminder of the cost of sin. Yet, out of this dark chapter in David's life, there came a glimmer of redemption. Bathsheba later gave birth to another son, Solomon, who would go on to become one of Israel's greatest kings. And the moral of this story is, even kings can make mistakes, but acknowledging them and seeking forgiveness is what truly matters. It's a timeless lesson about the importance of honesty, the dangers of temptation, and the healing power of repentance. Remember, no one, not even a king, is above making mistakes. What matters is how we learn and grow from them. Now let's move on to the story of a very wise king, King Solomon. His wisdom was not just about knowing things, but about understanding people's hearts. And nowhere was this more evident than in his judgment between two mothers. Our tale is set in the royal court where two women stood before King Solomon. Each claimed to be the mother of the same baby. A real puzzle, right? Indeed, it was a case that would challenge even the wisest of minds. The first woman explained that she and the other woman lived in the same house. They both had given birth to little boys, but tragically, one of the babies had not survived. She insisted that the surviving baby was hers, and her housemate had switched the babies while she was asleep. The second woman, however, fervently contradicted her. She insisted that the living baby was her own, and the deceased one belonged to the first woman. A difficult predicament, to be sure, with both women presenting convincing arguments, and no witnesses to confirm either side of the story. King Solomon listened attentively to both women. He knew that he had to approach this case with not just his mind, but his heart as well. He asked for a sword to be brought to him. As the court watched in silent anticipation, Solomon announced that the only fair solution was to divide the living baby in two, giving each woman a half. A gasp filled the court. The first woman, in a burst of maternal love, cried out, urging the king to give the baby to the other woman, rather than see him harmed. The other woman, though, coldly agreed to Solomon's proposal. King Solomon, in his wisdom, instantly knew who the real mother was. The woman who was willing to give up her baby to save him was the true mother. He ordered that the baby be given to her unharmed. This judgment reverberated throughout the kingdom, and the people held King Solomon in awe for his wisdom. But it wasn't just about clever thinking, was it? It was about understanding the depth of a mother's love. A love so profound that she would rather lose her child to another than see him come to harm. This is where the true wisdom of Solomon shone through. He understood that wisdom isn't just about knowledge, it's about understanding the heart, about knowing what truly matters. It's about compassion, empathy, and the courage to make difficult decisions. The lesson from this story is, wisdom lies not just in knowledge, but in understanding the heart. It's about seeing beyond the surface, beyond what's evident. It's about reaching into the very soul of a matter to uncover the truth that lies beneath. Remember, wisdom is not always about having the right answers, but asking the right questions and understanding what's truly important. Have you ever wondered about the grand temples you see in pictures of Jerusalem? Well, let's travel back in time together to the age of King Solomon, who was renowned not only for his wisdom, but also for his monumental achievements. One of the most significant among these was the construction of God's temple in Jerusalem. King Solomon, the son of David and Bathsheba, was a man of his word. His father, David, had desired to build a house for God, but it was Solomon who was chosen to bring this divine dream to fruition. The task was not a simple one. It required an immense amount of dedication, reverence, and a firm commitment to fulfill the promise made to God. So, Solomon assembled a massive workforce of around 150,000 laborers and 3,600 overseers. They embarked on a journey to Lebanon to fetch the finest cedar and cypress wood. Solomon's dedication was such that he didn't settle for anything less than the best. For the house of God, only the finest materials would do. The construction of the temple was not just about building a physical structure. It was more about manifesting a sacred space where God would dwell among his people. Every detail was meticulously planned and executed. The temple was to be 60 cubits long, 20 wide, and 30 high, all carefully measured according to divine instructions. The inner sanctuary, where the Ark of the Covenant would reside, was lined with pure gold, symbolizing the divine presence of God. The construction took 7 long years. The workers labored tirelessly, showing immense dedication and reverence for the task at hand. They carved intricate designs into the wood and stone, and the entire temple was built without the sound of hammers, axes, or any other iron tools at the construction site. This was to ensure that the sanctity and peace of the holy place were maintained. Upon completion, Solomon dedicated the temple to God with a heartfelt prayer. He acknowledged that no earthly temple could contain the divine, yet he prayed that God's eyes may always be open towards this house day and night. It was a heartfelt plea for God's mercy and forgiveness for his people. Afterwards, Solomon hosted a grand feast that lasted for 14 days. People from all walks of life gathered to celebrate this monumental achievement. They offered sacrifices to God and reveled in the glory of the newly built temple, the symbol of their faith and devotion. The construction of God's temple was a testament to Solomon's dedication and reverence. He fulfilled his promise to God not just by building a physical structure, but by creating a sacred space for God's presence among his people. And the moral of the story is, when we promise something to God, we should do everything in our power to fulfill it. Solomon's dedication to building the temple serves as a timeless reminder of the importance of keeping our promises, especially those made to God. It encourages us to strive with all our might to bring our good intentions to life. But what happens when a leader doesn't listen to his people? Now let's turn the pages of history and delve into the story of Israel's rebellion against Rehoboam, a tale that unfolds in the first book of Kings, chapter 12. This story is a quintessential lesson about leadership, humility, and the consequences of arrogance. Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, ascends the throne after his father's death. But the people of Israel are weary. They've been working hard building the temple and other projects under Solomon's rule. So, they approach the new king, Rehoboam, requesting him to lighten their burdens. Rehoboam seeks counsel, first from the old men who advised his father Solomon. They suggest a gentle approach, advising him to answer the people kindly. The old advisors believed that if Rehoboam were to serve the people and lighten their burdens, they would forever be loyal to him. But Rehoboam isn't satisfied with this advice. He turns to the young men he grew up with, who advise him to show his strength instead. They suggest that he should tell the people that he'll add to their burdens, not lighten them, and show them that he's a stronger king than his father ever was. Caught between these two pieces of advice, Rehoboam makes a choice that will change the course of his rule. He chooses to follow the advice of the young men and respond harshly to the people's pleas. When Rehoboam announces his decision, the people are shocked and dismayed. They had hoped for a kinder, more understanding ruler, but instead, they find a king who is more interested in demonstrating his power than in their welfare. This sparks a rebellion. The 10 northern tribes of Israel reject Rehoboam as their king and choose Jeroboam, an officer under Solomon, as their new leader. Only the tribes of Judah and Benjamin remain loyal to Rehoboam. The kingdom that was once united under David and Solomon is now divided. This division leads to a long and bitter conflict that lasts for years, all because a king refused to listen to his people and chose to act in arrogance rather than humility. The story of Rehoboam and the rebellion of Israel is a timeless reminder of the importance of good leadership. A good leader is not just someone who holds a position of power, but someone who listens to those they lead and acts in their best interests. They understand that leadership is not about showing off their strength, but about serving their people with kindness and humility. Rehoboam's story shows us the consequences of ignoring these principles. His arrogance and refusal to listen led to the division of his kingdom and a legacy of conflict. This story teaches us that a good leader listens to his people and acts in their best interests. Finally, let's journey to a time of prophets and miracles, to a dramatic showdown on the top of Mount Carmel. Here we meet Elijah, a prophet of God, in a face-off with 450 prophets of Baal, a false god worshipped by some people of that time. The land was gripped in a severe drought, a punishment from God due to the people's worship of Baal. Elijah, in his unwavering faith, challenged the prophets of Baal. "Let's find out who the true God is," he proposed. "You call on Baal and I will call on the Lord. The one who answers by fire, he is God." The prophets of Baal agreed. They prepared their bull for sacrifice and called on Baal from morning till noon, but there was no answer. They danced and shouted, even cut themselves in desperation, but their cries fell on deaf ears. Then came Elijah's turn. He repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down, using 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel.
He prepared his bull for sacrifice and did something unusual. He dug a trench around the altar and filled it with water, soaking the sacrifice and the wood. He was making it seemingly impossible for a fire to start. Then Elijah prayed. He called upon God, not with shouts and dances, but with a humble and sincere heart. "Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel," he said, "let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant." Suddenly the power of God descended. Fire from heaven consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust, and even licked up the water in the trench. The people who saw this fell on their faces, awestruck. "The Lord, He is God," they exclaimed. The false prophets were defeated and the truth of God's power was revealed. Elijah's faith didn't stop there. He climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bent down to the ground, and prayed for rain. After 7 times of prayer, a small cloud appeared, and soon a heavy rain fell down, ending the long drought. Elijah's story is a powerful testament to the power of faith and prayer. He stood alone against 450 prophets of Baal, yet he never wavered. He trusted in God, prayed with a sincere heart, and witnessed miracles. His faith brought about the defeat of false prophets, the acknowledgement of God's power, and the end of a punishing drought. And the moral of this story? Always keep faith in God, even in the face of overwhelming odds. For faith can move mountains, bring down fire, and call forth rain from a clear sky. So in our lives, when we face challenges that seem impossible to overcome, let's remember Elijah's faith and the power of sincere prayer. So, what have we learned from these stories? Let's take a moment to reflect together. Each of these stories, whether it's David and Bathsheba, Solomon's wise judgment, the building of God's temple, Israel's rebellion against Rehoboam, or Elijah's stand against the prophets of Baal, they all hold profound lessons. From David and Bathsheba, we learned that even the most righteous among us can falter, and the importance of owning up to our mistakes. We saw that true repentance brings forgiveness, and that it's never too late to correct our path. Solomon's wisdom in judging the 2 women taught us the power of discernment. More than just cleverness or knowledge, wisdom is the ability to discern what is truly important, to see beyond the surface, and to make decisions that are just and fair. The construction of God's temple by Solomon illustrated the significance of dedication and reverence. It taught us that great endeavors require great commitment and that anything worth doing is worth doing well. When Israel rebelled against Rehoboam, we saw the consequences of arrogance and ignoring wise counsel. It reminded us that listening to others, especially those with more experience, is crucial in leadership and in life. Elijah's confrontation with the prophets of Baal showed us the courage it takes to stand up for what is right, even when we're outnumbered or faced with opposition. It's a call to remain steadfast in our beliefs and to trust in the power of truth. I invite you all to reflect on these lessons. How can we apply them in our own lives? How can they guide our decisions and actions? Let's not just hear these stories, but truly listen to them and let them shape us into better people. Remember, these stories are not just tales from the past, but lessons for us to carry into the future.